Yeah, so let me jump in. And I'm gonna just share my screen real quick. I already created a React app here on my computer. Just gonna rearrange this. Let me just, I think this is over here. And we're just gonna go through this stuff. And we started with, was it events we started with? Jay? I think it was events. So we're gonna start with
events. Yeah.
All right, cool. So let me start this. I already did the whole Create React app just so we skip that whole step, and it's already opened up on in my VS Code. So I'm gonna just do npm start so we can start that. While we're doing this, since this is the default React app, I'm gonna go ahead and delete some stuff because we don't need this stuff. I'm just gonna delete. Don't need that. None of this. It's just the app. Let's get rid of this. Just hit save. And whenever this loads, it's just going to say app in there. Okay. Just waiting for this to load. So with those click events, those are basically like just regular HTML events. And like Jay was saying, we basically camel case them in React. And there's a lot of them. It's a whole bunch of events. The ones I mostly use on the job are the on-click events and on-change events. Mostly on-click, but on-change after that. And everything else I don't really use, to be honest. We don't really have so much of a use case. The only other time we use another one is the on mouse over and on mouse leave. And that's when, like, if you've ever seen those icons, those information icons on like a website, you hover over the eye icon and it shows you like a pop-up. Like that's when you'll use the on mouse over event. You will show that pop-up on mouse leave event actually to like remove that pop-up. That's how that works. But let me quickly show you some quick examples of events. I'm gonna open up the terminal. Let's get the console open. And I'm gonna create a few different HTML elements. I'll say, let's copy it down. This one is going to be the on click. As you can see, when I start typing it, we can see all of the different events. When you just type on, these are literally every single event that we can capture. I don't know what half of these things are, so they come into place whenever you're doing like special things. So the first thing I want to show y'all, right, is that we can put it. So with this event, right, we set it equal to something in curly brackets. And remember, in React, every time you see curly brackets, you want to think, I'm about to add some JavaScript inside of there. So what I'm going to add in here is an anonymous function. So just an arrow function without a name. So arrow function here, curly brackets, and I'm just do a console log of click. And I'll actually give this some text to click as well. Click is not defined. Oh, gotta be a string. Okay. So if I click this, we see that click shows up right here in the console. Now, one thing I want to say about this is whenever we put this arrow function inside of here, this is actually there's actually some room for improvement as far as how much time it takes this page to render. Every time, so let's say the app component rendered, right? Every time the app component renders and it goes into this HTML, it has to again build this function, and it builds that function and saves it somewhere every single time this return re-renders, like this app component re-renders. So in order to avoid that small little optimization, we want to put this inside of an on-chain, on-click handler. We want to put that inside of a function. So now if app re-renders, actually let me write that real quick. On click handler. Yeah, it is. So to backtrack, whenever app re-renders, this return fires again. Everything inside of it does not fire. Like all of the other stuff don't fire. For example, like this function, this was already somewhere, is already saved somewhere in some random location. It's not going to reinitialize this function and try to save it again. So whenever we see it inside of the HTML, it referenced the same location that this was saved to begin with. So every time this re-renders or whenever this return fires again, then we don't have to re-render this function every single time. So you want to separate out these functions like outside of the actual HTML. Now we can either put it here or we can put it out here. Um, there's a difference here. Now, right now, if we click this, we can see that there's no difference right now, but I typically put this inside of the component. And the reason I put it inside of the component is because whenever I start messing with like the component state, I have access to the state inside of within this function. So just always put it inside of the actual component. So that's the on click. I'm gonna do the same thing for, let's do an on change. Then I'll do an on change handler.
Actually, Isaiah, do me a favor, man. Could you explain one more time why you putting the on click handler inside the app function instead of outside of it?
Right. So whenever let me comment these out. Okay, cool. So whenever we put this, whenever we put this inside of the app, we have access to the state of this app. Now Jay had just gave us an example of state, let's say name, right, and set name. And we're gonna go back over this a little bit later too. But this is use state, and the name for this, I'm just gonna, by default, is gonna be Isaiah. Now inside of this function, now we have access to the state. This is the state right here. So if I click this, it says click Isaiah, right? Because it knows what name is. But if this was outside of this, it's going to say name is undefined. It's not even going to know what name is. See, unexpected use of name. So the reason you put it inside of here is so that you have access to state if you need it. Now, if you don't need the state, you can put it outside of it. But I would just typically put all those functions inside of the component before the return statement. That answers your question?
Yes.
I also have a question.
Yeah.
Can you give a ghost div class name?
A ghost div. Oh, no, you can't, like a fragment.
Yeah, thank you.
Are fragments. No,
Yeah.
you can't get those.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it has to be a name div, like in order to.
Right. So these fragments are just placeholders. Basically, React behind the scenes puts an HTML element here, like maybe a div or something like that, and then renders it on the page, and then it removes it from the page. So even if you put an ID here or a class name, it's going to get removed. It's literally just a placeholder so that you're able to put more than one HTML element. You don't have to use an extra div, because then the HTML starts to get really, really nested. There's like a lot of HTML elements if you always got to put like a top level div. And if you don't need the top level div, you can just use the fragment. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Makes sense. It makes the sense.
So let me comment this back in. So we have the on change handler. Let's read that really quick. Get rid of this name. Don't need that there anymore. Get rid of that. This is going to be change. And we'll do the on mouse over. Where is it? Mouse over. Same thing on mouse over handler. And this naming, this naming is like convention. Like whatever, like handler, like on change handler, on mouse over handler. Like handlers is like the standard way of writing those things. I'll just do a mouse leave as well. So on mouse leave handler. I'm sure I messed something up. I'm good. So this is over and this is leave. And I'll actually put those in here too, change. This is going to be over and this is going to be leave. Okay, go back here. Obviously, if we click this one, it fires. Now this change is not going to fire because this change, it has to actually change. The only way that works is with an input box, and I'll quickly show you that real quick. But this over, every time I literally go over this, we can see that it logs to the console. So 5, 6, 7, 8. And with this leave, every time I leave this, it fires. So leave. See, just another event. Let me change this, and let me change this to an input box. I mean input tag. I'll say on change handler here. And this is where we're going to bring in that event. So the input box has the change here. And we can see that every time we click something, that change event happens. Now, if you want to get access to whatever text is inside of here, that's when you use the event. So with the input box, we're using this on change handler. So if we go here, we can pass it an event. So I'm gonna just say E. What this is actually passed to all of these functions, but I'm just going to use it here in this one case. So I'm gonna console log what E is. I'm also going to console log what E.target is, so we can see everything. And I'm going to console log what E.target.value is.
Can you console log E.type too?
Sure. E.type. Type. Cool. I'm gonna refresh this to get rid of all of this stuff here. So no React is not gonna refresh for me. So I'm gonna click in here. I'm gonna press H. So I pressed H. This is the actual event. There's a lot of stuff in here. Let me see. Actually, it's not as much as I thought it was gonna be. Target. There's here we go. There's a lot of stuff here. So there's a lot of stuff that happened with that one event. And this explains all of that stuff. And the type of event is the change. It's the change event. If we go in here, we see type is here. This event is an object. So the object.type is change here. That's why change printed out. So E.target is the input box. If we go here and go target, see E.target is the input box. It's the same thing that printed out. That's just the HTML, that's the JSX element or HTML element. So E.target.value, so E.target, so if I go in here, and I say .value, value is here, value is H. And that is why H prints out down here. So E.target.value gives you the value of whatever is inside of the this input box. And obviously, if you didn't remember where that was, you can just print out the event like we did here, and you can just go through it. Okay, like target, we got value here. You can use you can use a lot of these things if you want to. I can console log what the client width is, the client top. I don't even know what client top is. Min length, I'm not sure where they even get that from, but yeah, there's so much information in here, and there's different ways to use these things depending on your situation. But most of the time, the only thing you're gonna need is this value, like literally 99.99% of the time. The only thing you're pulling out is the value. So E.target.value is something that you're gonna see a lot. Any questions on that? Cool. So we got click events, change events, mouse over events, and mouse leave events. So that is events. Let me see what's next. We got conditions next. NJ, just quick, I like how you separated all of these things into different components. that was a good way to demonstrate what you did. So um, yeah,
Thank
just
you.
for now. But yeah, with what was it? Conditions. Okay. So with conditions, let me actually erase. I'm gonna delete all of this stuff.
Actually, one quick question about the conditions too. We were talking about how, well, Java was talking about the functions, how you can write arrow functions inside other arrow functions. Could you explain that one more time?
Um,
Because
oh
Java was talking about, yeah, go ahead, go ahead.
yeah, so maybe he was okay. So
I
this
was talking about writing functions inside of components.
yeah,
So
you
basically,
say the
oh, go
component.
ahead.
It was regular function like this before, like, but we can make this arrow function. So yeah, those arrow functions can go inside of other arrow functions. The component being an arrow function, and this is an arrow function as well. So
Okay, that's what.
Now the question that I have is, can you put components inside of another component, like one
Yeah.
component inside of another?
yeah, thank you for asking that because I saw that you was about to do that with something. So I would never put a component inside of another component because whenever this app runs, the very first time it runs, it has to load itself and it has to load the component on top of that. You want each of these components to load for themselves. So yeah, that's what I would definitely leave those separate. Now you can do it, but I wouldn't do it for performance reasons. So what I'm about to do is actually I'm gonna take I'll leave those there actually. So we're gonna do what was the conditions? Okay, I keep forgetting. So I'm gonna do something here. I'm gonna say I'm gonna create some state and I'm gonna use that use state hook, and I'll say show name. Show name is going to be some condition. Set show name by convention, and we make that camel case right there. And I'll default it to false. Actually, yeah, I'll keep like this. So show name.
Question,
Go ahead.
and this is another question I have. So, can I set use state to a string, like as a default value, and then change it to a Boolean when I set it?
Yeah, you can. I would avoid doing it, but you can do it. You can. It's flexible as you want. There's no restriction on that. For yeah.
Okay, the reason I did it is because I sometimes I don't be wanting the function to fire, and so I set it to a string so it wouldn't fire, like my conditional statement. So by default, it doesn't fire. Then when I, change it, update, whatever, then it changes to true or false and updates. But I bet there's probably a different, better way to do that.
You just do it like this by default.
Yeah, exactly.
So
And then
this actually does this evaluates to something. This evaluates to either true or false. Which one does that evaluate to?
true. I mean false. Empty strings are false.
Right, exactly. So it is
It's
running.
falsy.
It's just it's just falsy.
Yeah. Crap.
Yeah.
Darn.
But yeah,
So then I guess I could probably put in values and then just use else if statements 1, 2, and 3. Call it a day. All right.
yeah. I would use the same type. Like if it's something, if you knew it was an object, just put it as an empty object, and then set it some other time. Like I will always use the actual value because this makes it more readable. Me looking at this for the very first time, I know this is going to be a Boolean.
Yeah.
Boolean is like
Exactly.
default, so that's how we use it.
But I probably use like a if statement 1, 2, and 3. 1 is or 0, like 0 is off, 1 is on, 2 is on for the second option, something like that, like the case switch type thing.
Right,
For
yeah.
default. Yeah, something like that. I figure. Thank you.
Yeah, you can get creative with how you do it. But yeah, I'm making this right, and this is state. Like literally every time we use this use state thing, this is like a variable that can change. This being the value of that variable, and this is actually the function that you use to change the value, you can never do something like this, like show name equals true. You couldn't do that. If I do that, I'm pretty sure it's gonna be an error. It's gonna give me an error. It didn't give me an error. But if you do this, what's going to happen is React is not going to actually let me show y'all actually instead of just telling you. This is what I'm gonna do. And we're gonna get back to why we need to use this as opposed to setting this equal to something. So I have show name there, right? Show name is a Boolean. I'm putting it inside of curly brackets. Remember, every time you see curly brackets inside of the JSX or the HTML, just we're gonna call it JSX. We know that we're about to put some JavaScript. I put a Boolean here. I'm gonna use a ternary. So if that's true, then I'm gonna say Isaiah. Right? If we show name, it's gonna be Isaiah. Else, we're just gonna say no. We're not gonna show anything. So I'm gonna save that. If I go back here, we don't see anything displayed on the screen right now. And honestly, maybe we can say no name to display. And no name to display is going to show here because it defaults to false, right? Now, let me change the value of this, and I'm gonna do that inside of the onClick handler. So when I fire that onClick, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna say show name equals true. That's what I'm gonna do, right? And this is not gonna work, by the way. So if I actually let me actually put a console log here also and say quit. Let me put this underneath this so that we know that it actually fired. This is not a string, now it's a string. Okay. If I clear this out and I click this, it says, hold on. Let me do this again. Click this and it gives me an error. What does it say? Assignment to constant variable. Let me change this to a let here instead. Let me see if that does anything. Let me do this, click this again, and it says click. But even though we clicked it and this now we change this to true, we're expecting Isaiah to show here, but it's not showing. And the reason it's not showing is because we can't update it like this. React doesn't know that something updated in the React virtual DOM or the JSX that we're showing here on the screen. Anytime React only knows that something updated when you use React's way of updating it. So I do set show name and just put true here. I'm gonna hit save. I'm gonna go here and I'm gonna click this, and now Isaiah shows up because now React knows that something changed, and it uses the function to determine when something changes. So that makes
And that's the hook, right?
Right, exactly. Yeah, that's the function that this React hook gave us back. It gave us back this function. So I'm gonna do this now, and I'm gonna also show y'all a little trick. We can either set it equal to a value, or you can give it a function, and that function gives you the last value here, like the previous value. Previous value. If I do a console log of this value and show you what that gives us. When we click this, it gives us back. Let me refresh. Click that, it says false there. If I click it again, it just keeps saying undefined. Now, there's a reason it's saying undefined. Whenever we give this a function, we have to return something. And whatever we return is what we set it equal to the next time. So if I return not previous value, if the previous value is true, it's going to return false and it's going to set it equal to false. If the previous value is false, it's going to return true because it is not, and it's going to set it equal to true. And this is how you toggle an HTML element. So now every time I click this, it gives me back either true or false. And the reason it gives back undefined before was because we never returned anything. So it wasn't, it was undefined. We didn't give it back anything. And again, all of these like logs here, these grayed out ones, that's React doing that in the background. Just, we don't have to worry about that with those ones. But does this make sense how we're getting these true and false, um, like alternating like this?
Yeah, I saw that too when I was looking at some of the documents. That's pretty cool. You can just put the not operator there to toggle back and forth a lot less code.
Right, exactly. And sometimes, so sometimes we want to put like logic in here, like depending on certain situations, we want to like update the value to be something else. That's the use case of setting it equal to a function as opposed to just setting it equal to a value. You just throw all that logic directly inside of here. So that's what you would do there.
Well, so wow, that's
Go ahead, Jay, you were saying something?
so what the let keyword doesn't really do anything.
No, we can put const back here. The only reason I put let is because I was trying to change this to something else. Like I was
Yeah.
manually trying to change it. But yeah, this works. This works with const. And I'll always use const for this because we're not, so when we use const, right, we can't change the value. Like we can't change the value of this thing anymore or whatever. Like that these are linked in that way. But when we use set show name, what that does is it completely destroys this value and it recreates it in a different like memory location. So it literally creates a whole new variable, which is why we're able to use const. We're just destroying it and then recreating it, which is why React updates the page. So that's where that comes from. Anytime React sees a variable being recreated like that, and that's what this function does for us. It's gonna update. So like any state variable, I should say, and this is a state variable.
I also noticed that you're not returning anything from your functions.
These here,
Like the on-chain handler or the on mouse over handler, you're
Yeah.
not necessarily returning anything from those functions.
right?
You're only returning something from the previous value. I mean from your your set show name function.
Yeah, because this takes two different types of variables. So it takes one. So this is a function. This function takes one parameter. That parameter can either be some value or it can be another function. And it does that check on the other side just to see, okay, is this a function? And if it is a function, we're going to do this. And if it's a value, we're going to do something else. This return has nothing to do with like these change handlers. It's just how this set show name works, like this setter.
All right. So basically, I guess the question I'm asking is, you unless it's like a set show name that's a function that takes another function, you don't have to return a value from any of the functions that you create in your
Like these handlers, these change handlers,
yeah.
these event handlers. I mean, yeah, they're not. Yeah, I wouldn't think of them as. I would. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, you don't have to. Don't think of them as connected in any way. We're just
Yeah.
using them. We're just using them together. This return has nothing to do with like this event handler.
So from components, we returning JSX from crud. Okay. And then from components, we're returning JSX, and from functions, we don't have to return anything.
Right. Yeah.
It'll automatically return from the function, essentially, or we'll automatically be able to get the value from the function.
No. I think you so don't think of. I think you might be overthinking a little bit.
Maybe.
Yeah. If you only return something from a function when you need to return something, these functions work exactly the same as it works in regular JavaScript, and that's what this is. All this stuff is just JavaScript. None of
Yeah.
these click handlers require you to return anything. You don't have to return anything from there. All of these things,
Right.
the only thing this does is it runs this function whenever this event gets triggered. Whenever we click this, it runs this. Whenever we get it, whenever it sees an on change event, it runs this. Whenever it sees an on mouse event, it runs that. Don't think of it as we got to return something, because there's no use of returning anything from these event handlers. These event.
Okay. So I was thinking, so I had my question. I don't want to waste the time. Nah. So I return normally. So like, for example, if I wanted to return like 5 from a function, I would still return 5.
If you needed to return 5.
Like yeah, like regular JavaScript, like A times A, return A times A or something like that. Like I wanted to create a function that squares the input. Then I do like a times A type situation.
Yeah.
And I can
If you
return
need-
that.
Return it. Yeah, exactly. You return it. Yeah, only if you need it. In that case, yeah, you did need it. So if you want to say, okay, you want this function to multiply something, and then you wanted to return that value back, then you return it. So yeah, but don't these event handlers won't
You don't need to return them because
You
it's
don't
gonna
need-
run the function automatically and output whatever you put in there.
right. Yeah, it's just gonna run those functions. Yeah,
Yeah.
don't. I wouldn't return any. I've never seen anything return from one of these event handlers. So
All right, makes sense. Okay. I feel like I believe that I think that I have a feeling that I understand it, and we short on time. So yeah, I
Yeah.
want you to go ahead and get yours in. So okay.
let me just, yeah, right. Let me so that I just created this this array of letters, right? Now what I want to do is I want to display each of these letters on the screen. Now what I'm going to do is I want to put JavaScript inside of here. I use those curly brackets again. I want to use letters, and I'm going to map over these letters. The reason we're using map is because map returns back it returns back something to the JSX. So if I write we're able to return something from map. That's why we're using map. In here, I want to return some JSX. I'm going to return the paragraph tag, and that paragraph tag is just going to give me back the letter. Let's just say, I'm just gonna say let's. We got to put that inside of curly brackets as well. So so I have map here, and actually let me do this the long way so that we can see this a little bit better. We have a anonymous function inside of here. I'm just gonna say let for letter, and we're gonna return here. We're gonna return.
Let is a keyword. You probably wouldn't want to use it.
Yeah, you're right. I'm just gonna say letter. I didn't want to use letter like this because it's like letters and letter, but yeah, this is like the letter. And in here, since I'm using JavaScript, I have to put those curly brackets again, and I'm putting a variable inside of there. So if I hit save, go here, you see those letters print out, A, B, C, D. Now, from here, what I'm gonna do is I know that, so another thing I wanted to bring out, if we use for each here, this is not gonna work because for each doesn't return anything. So if I think it's camel case actually. It's a camel case.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So camel case, we don't see anything print out here on the screen because for each doesn't return anything. Map does it. So we're using map. I'm going to go back and get rid of all this extra stuff. We're just returning one thing. So I'm just going to return the paragraph by itself. I can just straight do this. We don't even need those parentheses. Those are optional. We don't need this last curly bracket here. And this works exactly the same. I'm just going to return the paragraph with these. It's all the same. So yeah, we're just looping over an array. And obviously we can get fancy by looping over an array of objects, and that will actually give us more options or whatever. Right now, we're just printing out what the letter is. But if we did like, for example, letter dot, let's say the value is A here. I'm gonna do the same thing with these value. So now we have an array of objects. I'm going to delete these two. Format the document. So now we have, to make this look better, more readable, we have an array of objects. And now if I hit save, it's not gonna give us back what we want to be given back. The very first thing we got to do is do letter dot value, because now we're referencing an array. If I go here and I just for demonstration purposes, let me return this. I'm gonna put this back how it was before, and I'm going to do a console log of what letter is, just so that we can see it. Let me clear this and refresh. Okay, so letter is this. So letter dot value is A, letter dot value here is B, and that's why we're getting A and B right here. Times it 54. Okay, so that's how you do that. And the last thing was forms. Now with forms, remember when we went over that event.prevent default thing? Actually, we actually went over it actually with the forms. So inside of this on change, we didn't put that event.default prevent default, and that's because this input box is not wrapped with a form tag. Now, it's not necessarily best practice, but I never ever wrap input boxes inside of forms. I just never do it. Like I don't care that is best practice or not, because I don't want to write that event.prevent default like extra piece, and now I got to remember to write that every single time. I'm not gonna always remember that. So I just leave out the form altogether. If I don't need it, then if I don't want to submit something, I'm not using the form. And there's very rare cases where I actually use the form HTML tag or JSX tag in this case. So that's forms. And the only other piece is whenever we're changing this, we don't want this to freely change by itself. We want to control the value of this input box. And the reason we want to control the value of the input box is because like sometimes we want to put like some logic in here with like the value. Like we don't want to just like type something and just let that just be like that. For example, let's see. I feel like it's gonna cut off in like a minute. Let me see if I can get through this without this cutting off. But see, inside of this on change, I'm gonna control this with the value. I'm gonna say the value of this is input value, and I'm gonna create this variable right now in state. I'm gonna create that here. Input value, set input value. Right. I'm gonna use state. I'm gonna set it to a default of this is the default. So if I go back here, it's gonna it refreshes with this is a default. We automatically gave it some text, and we don't have to do that. I'm just gonna default it with an empty string. Keep that as is. Defaults that back to an empty string. Okay, cool. Now if I want to control this right now when I type in here, nothing happens because like the value of it is